All right, so this is, by the way, if you want to be in National Cyber League, fill out this form by October 7. I guess I'll be hearing more about this within a couple of days. October 7 is very soon. Anyway, so this is 126. So what I'm planning to do today is talk about IDA Pro, that's the lecture, and then do a few demos. And then if we have time, I would like to talk about the Flare contest, the Flare CTF that's on. I've got a presentation about that, but I have to do it over Zoom. I can't just publish it on YouTube the way I usually do because that contest is still taking place. So it would be rude to publish public videos about how to solve the challenges. We'll do that sort of privately. Anyway, so let's start with IDA Pro, which is here. IDA Pro is the standard for disassembly for a really long time. I must say, I did all those Flare challenges. Well, I did all the ones I solved, which is 4 of them. I never used IDA Pro. I just used Ghidra instead. So, but anyway, IDA Pro has been the standard for a long time, but it's hard to use, and Ghidra is nicer. Anyway, it's very expensive.
Why is Ghidra nicer?
It's free. Ghidra is free from the NSA.
But this one is almost free, right?
This one has a free version, it's just limited, but the really exciting features are in the pay version, which cost like $5,000 or $10,000.
What are the features in Ghidra that this IDA Pro doesn't have?
The main feature, he's asking what feature IDA Pro doesn't have. The main feature IDA Pro does not have is it does not have a decompiler. All it does is disassemble. Ghidra will decompile into C code. So you do not have to read assembler, which is very valuable. And for that, IDA Pro will charge you $5,000 or $10,000. So it's,
You basically follow the C code.
what's that?
So you basically follow the C code.
Yeah, it's much easier. Yeah, much easier than reading assembly. Yeah, the C code makes it a lot faster and easier. That's why I like it. It has a bunch of other features too, but that's the main feature I use. So anyway, there's a free version out there, but the free version only does 32-bit code. Pay version, you support 64 and ARM and such. They have code, they can detect common library code. And so this is the text mode, where it just lists all the commands, the address, the mnemonic, and the attribute. An estimate about when I will cover Flare challenges. Well, I don't know. Certainly not for an hour. Anyway, this is graph mode, where it shows each module in a little box and an arrow pointing to the other modules so you can sort of more easily follow the flow. This is an if, and I think the red is if it's false, and the green if it's true, and the blue is an unconditional jump. Anyway, that's the layout there. So here's the default graph mode display. You'll see it like this. All it does is show you the assembly language instructions, and it has a header that tells you the variables, but it does not give you the addresses, and it does not give you the actual bytes of the command, which is rude. So you go into general options and you fix that by adding line prefixes and giving it some number for opcode bytes. And now it'll give you the address and the actual literal opcodes, and then the commands, which is usually what you want, all the information. So, like I said, red is a conditional jump not taken, green is a conditional jump taken, blue is an unconditional jump, and up is a jump backwards to form a loop. So here you got red and green and blue, which you've seen before. And if you highlight text, like if I highlight EBP, it will highlight all other EBPs nearby. So it's very easy to highlight something and see if there's another reference to that address or command nearby. In text mode, you've got arrows here. Yeah, there's little gray arrows, hard to see there. Solid dashed and up. Solid is unconditional, dashed is conditional, and up is a loop. Here's the section, what section of the PE file it's in. Usually you're in the text section, but you might be in a data section for code. Then the address, and so here's the actual disassembly, and IDA Pro adds comments to try to make it easier, just like Ollie Debug does. It puts things over here to try to help you, like there's a cross-reference to this somewhere else. It refers to a string, so it lets you see what that string is. This refers to a string, successful internet connection. So it notices if an address being pushed points to a string, it puts the string there so you can see it. This is very handy. You can get an idea what's going on by just looking at the readable strings. And so those are called auto comments, and they're on by default. That adds, or maybe they aren't. Maybe this turns on even more of them. That adds comments to every instruction. I guess the other one has auto comments turned off and only has a few comments. Anyway, so here's some windows you use. Functions is kind of useful. It shows you the name of every function, and you can double-click it to go to the code using that function. There's a names window that gives you every address with a name. So that may be useful, probably more useful if you have symbols in your code, which you almost never do in malware, but still, it may be useful. And strings, of course, we've used a lot. These strings are, I think these are reference text strings stored in the data, but I'm not sure if these are reference. Anyway, I'm not sure if it's just doing strings or if it's doing just reference strings, but it looks like just reference strings to me because I don't see any random combinations of bytes that just look like strings. And this, of course, is where I almost always start. I start with strings, and then I can get to the part of the code that does something interesting, because I run the code first and see, something it prints, and then I know how to get to the right part of
I
code.
think those are like default function names.
Way back here, they're function names. Yeah, these are function names. But these are just strings, and some of them are function names, some of them are other things.
Those look like function names.
Now here you get messages like arrow no,
Yeah,
it's,
those are like messages, but
yeah, the other these.
those look like function.
Yeah, these are API calls. Yeah, those are Microsoft API calls, and yeah, various strings. That's right. And so then you got imports and exports, just like you'd see in many other tools you've used, like dependency walker. Here's the functions that are imported, and there's the export, which in an exe file, there's just one called start or main, something like that, to get it started. And then you can see data structures. So if at the heading, at the start of a function, it will list the objects that function calls, and you can hover over this and it'll show you this is a data structure with many different pieces. All right. And you have cross-references. So if you point to a function and double-click it, it will jump to the code in other views. So you can, that's true of almost every window. If you double-click something in one window, it'll go to another view and let you see it, often going you to the code that uses it, taking you to the code that uses it. Now, the way you use function calls in assembly is very important. The way it works is you're going to call this function here called string length. So first you push things on the stack. Push something, then you push something else, then you call it. This one, I think all you do is push a string. Push a pointer to the string, then call this. This is how functions work. When you call a function, it assumes that it's going to look on the stack and find the parameters. If you forget to push the parameters, it will just run the function on whatever junk happens to be left in the stack. All right. So there's also a way to get back to Windows Reset Desktop to get back to a default view if you manage to get lost wandering around at IDA Pro, which is pretty easy to do. So navigating it, I say double-click. You can go to a string, just double-click it, and you'll go to the assembly code that uses that string. It works in Ali Debug also, and it's very handy. This is typically how I orient myself when opening a new file. Now you can double-click any address in the disassembly window to display that function. Same thing, you double-click this, it'll jump to that function. It's all pretty obvious. And you have forward and back buttons, just like a browser. If you get enough somewhere you don't want to be and you want to go back where you were a while before, you can just go back through your steps. There's a navigation band with color. When you load a file, it will take time to populate this band. As IDA Pro analyzes the file, it will figure out what everything is. So light blue is library code, dark blue is the most important for us, user-written code, and then other stuff is like strings and things like that. So this is very useful. This is a one-dimensional graph of the entire file. You can click here to jump to areas of the file. It's one way to find your way back to interesting code. If you're wandering lost somewhere, click in the dark blue and you'll be back in user-written code. And you can also press G and then type in an address and jump to any location. And you can search for many, many things. The most useful thing I find, search text is one option, yeah. The one I like to do is, oh, that's right, that's Ali Debug. You don't have that here, but I mean, searching text is one good thing here. We'll use that in the projects. And cross-references. If you go to your code, you'll have these, somewhere there should be an xref on the page. There it is, code xref. So I have a function here, and the cross-reference, something else refers to this. So you can point to it, and it will, and if you hover over this, it will pop up the code that uses it. Here's something that calls main. So it tells you there's a cross-reference. You hover over this, and it will show you the lines that call it. And if you double-click it, it will go there. If you want to see all cross-references, you click it and press X, and then you'll get a chart of all the cross-references in case there are a lot of them, which would be the case if you choose like a commonly used library function or something. And, all right.
What's the function that, like, you look at a function, you want to find out who called this function?
Exactly, yeah.
What is that thing how to go there?
Well, I mean, actually, the question is, what would you use this for? Well, for example, if you're looking for network traffic, you might go to the library function that resolves a DNS and see every place it calls that.
I'm looking at one function, I want to see who calls this function.
Yeah.
How do I do that?
You click on the function and then press X, and it'll pop up this box and show you all the code that refers to this function.
No, but then you only show the code that for this function calls, right?
That calls that function, yes. But if
I want to go back one level up.
then you double click these, and it will go to that function. It will go to the place that called. Yeah, so that's how you follow it back to see who is using that function. Okay? Okay. Anyway, so all right. So IDAPRO names the function, and it also names the local variables. It can be wrong, by the way. Disassembly is not a perfect process. It makes some assumptions and it makes some guesses. There are ways to fool disassemblers, although I haven't seen any malware that uses it yet, but it does happen. So it can be wrong, but it does try to name what it finds. All right. And then there are graphing options. You almost never really use these. A lot of them are left over from the past. These will draw various graphical displays of a program, function calls, xrefs2, and so on. Yeah, a flowchart and function calls are old one. xrefs2 is another one. This will show all the paths that can get to a function. So for example, I went to calc.exe and it has check Windows genuine status, suggesting that Microsoft would verify your product key and not remove some features from calc. So I checked to see who calls it, and all you know is startup calls main and main calls it. So doesn't tell you much, but this is an example of a graph. You'd see what a graphical representation of what calls this function. You can do xrefs from, and that will show all the places that exit from this function, all the places it goes. That might be more useful. All right, and there's an xrefs chart where you can customize these things if you want to, which I never have done, but you could. All right, and so there is no undo. You can change things, though. Of course, as you analyze a file, you'll figure out what the variables all start with stupid names like this. Subroutines have names like that. Variables have names like that, because IDAPRO doesn't know what they are. So you just have a name that points to their address. You can rename them descriptive names, and it will automatically change it everywhere else. But of course, if you're getting it wrong, you're going to be losing track. But this is what people spend their time doing, figuring out what things are, labeling them, and using that to figure out more things. It's like building a jigsaw puzzle. So without renamed arguments, you'd see stuff like this: EBP plus arg4, EBP plus variable 598, and so on, location 4016F8 or FB. And here you can name something like this is port is a string, this is the port number. So they figured out that's the port number. That's the kind of thing. If you do figure out what things are, it gets a lot more readable. And this way you're getting closer to like real source code. All right, you can add a comment, and you can use a semicolon to echo that comment to all the cross-references. Everything is hexadecimal by default, but you can right-click to see what it looks like in octal, binary, and base 10. This is, in 10, good. All right, and you can have named constants. You can have these names declaring things. And what they do is, if you have symbolic constants, then it will replace the constants with the Microsoft official name for it. Microsoft has these constants that stand for things. So file attribute normal, open existing, and null instead of 83 and 0. It'll know what those constants actually mean in the context of that API call.
Does IDAPRO automatically do the symbolic constant replacement?
No, apparently not. Apparently you have to turn it on, and I'm not sure how to do it. I don't really know how to do it. I have not used that. It would be nice, though. And there are plugins. There are always a bunch of plugins for all sorts of things, find format string vulnerabilities and so on. And I think you can write your own. There are Python scripts and such. Oh, I've never used anything more than the very simple functions in IDAPRO. So that's all the IDAPRO we're going to do here, except we'll do project using it. But like I say, now that Ghidra is out, I'm just a lot less interested in IDAPRO. So I'm giving it sort of a cursory overview. Yeah, I think Ghidra is a better tool, and we'll talk about that quite a bit in the projects. But IDAPROW is the standard for really serious developers. That's what the student used to find the new jailbreak in the iPhone. Paid $10,000, got the 2 big monitors and the professional version of IDAPROW, and spent about a month going through the assembly code of the boot process for the iPhone, doing this process, labeling things, figuring it all out. If you're really, really serious, it's the tool you use. Just like Photoshop is the tool to make graphics. But if you're a casual user, it's not the most efficient way to get simple things done. All right. All right. I think we got everybody. All right, so what feature shows the instructions in boxes connected by arrows? Yep, they call it graph mode. Not a terribly obvious name. All right, which one shows user-written code as dark blue lines? Okay, that's navigation band, good. All the colored lines to tell you general characteristics of what various sections are, the code. Okay, what code can you not disassemble with the free version? All right, 64-bit, that's what you can't do. Good. All right, how do you move from graph mode to text mode? That spacebar is what does it. All right. All right, how do you move to a specific address? for go. All right. So, all right, I don't know if that's a real name or not. I know who that is.